Last summer, Joe Brown Jr., black youth of New Orleans, Louisiana, committed murder. Play a special summertime for him and play the same summertime for his friend James Roberts, who he shot to death. In every black community of America, in the ghettos and neighborhood clubs where we gather to play our music, we play summertime. But in no community does it sound like the summertime of George Gershwin. It is bluesier, darker, with its own beat and logic. Its joys unknown to the outside world. It is day now. The routine events of life have passed under the bridge. Joe Brown Jr. has been arrested, indicted, and formally charged with murder. It happened. It happened in a Ninth Ward bar that we need not name for the purpose of this presentation. The shooting was a culmination of an argument Joe Brown Jr. had with his friend. We have learned this, but the Louisiana Weekly only reported James Roberts is said to have made insulting remarks to Joe Brown Jr., whereupon Brown pulled out a gun and shot Roberts 3 times in the chest before he could be subdued. The story received front page play in the Louisiana Weekly and a lead-in in the Crime of the Day section of the Times-Picayune. After that, it received only minor news play. After all, there are other crimes in New Orleans to report. Play Summertime for Joe Brown Jr. and play the same summertime for his friend James Roberts, who he murdered. No one really knows why this murder happened. The people who know Joe Brown best have ideas. Mrs. Brown, do you have any ideas?
Joe didn't have any sense. He is smart. Oh yes, he has a good brain, but he didn't have any common sense. The important thing was to settle down, get a good job, and take care of his 3 children. We've been in the Liberty Park apartments for way too long, and we never have enough money. And to make matters worse, our landlord gave me this letter 3 months ago saying our home was uninhabitable following Hurricane Ida, and he would need to take back the apartment to make repairs. We tried to connect with legal assistance, but they said we're out of time. We never have enough time or money. He wanted things, but he wouldn't work to get them. Oh, he would take jobs at oyster houses, and he'd work on boats ever since he was a kid, but he wouldn't come home at night. Sometimes he wouldn't get up in the morning to go to work. Sometimes he would come in and snap the TV on and say it was driving him crazy. But I think he killed him because he had a bad temper and he didn't want to settle down. Joe was a mild person, but he carried knives and guns. That's just the way his family is. I used to tell him all the time. Once I asked him, when are you going to get a better job and make more money? He said, when I get rid of you and those snotty-nosed kids. Joe shot that man because he was foolish, wouldn't settle down and accept things as they are, and because he didn't have common sense. What now?
Sheriff's Department with a notice of eviction.
Mrs. Williams, can you comment on your former student, Joe Brown Jr.?
I don't remember Joe Brown Jr. very well. I have so many children to try to remember. Let me see. I had him 2 or 3 years ago, just before he dropped out of school. I was his homeroom teacher. Oh, Joe was like so many of the others here in the Ninth Ward, not interested in doing anything to help themselves. You can't teach them anything. They don't want to learn. They never study, and that's all there is to it. Sit still. Pay attention. It's no surprise to me that he's in trouble. I try my best, but I only have so much patience. I tell you, you don't know the things a teacher goes through with these kids. 2 students the other day got into a fight on the yard. You should have heard the names they called each other. Irritates my gas. Some of them have the nerve to bring knives and guns to school. Look, these kids just won't listen. They don't want to learn, and that's all there is to it.
Here is Joe Brown Jr.
You know, I seen a feature on TV about surfing. Surfing on beautiful waves on a beach in Hawaii or somewhere.
A black psychiatrist, Dr. Thomasina L. Brayboy.
At the core of Joe Brown's personality is a history of frustrations, psychological, sociological, economic.
And I wanted to do this. I wanted to surf. But it was a dream I had to keep to myself. Why? Because it's been stupid to say it out loud. And don't nobody want to be laughed at. Then I thought, you don't never see black people surfing anyway.
We might call Joe Brown's homicidal act an act of ritual murder. When murder occurs for no apparent reason but happens all the time, as in our race on Saturday nights, it is ritual murder. When I worked in Harlem Hospital in the emergency ward, I saw us coming in bleeding, blood seeping from the doors of taxicabs, guns, ice picks, and knives.
Play Summertime for Joe Brown Jr. and the same Summertime for his friend James Roberts, who he shot to death.
And then I thought, you never see black people on TV ever. They got shows like Blackish and Housewives of Atlanta and Meet the Browns, but those people so far removed from the people I know, they might as well be white too. And where am I? I asked my wife and she answered, in the Florida Avenue Projects, doing a poor job taking care of your wife and your children. Then my boss said, on the job, if you would keep your mind on what you're doing, count the oysters. Count the oysters.
My tests indicate that Joe Brown Jr. is considerably above average in intelligence. Above average. Vocabulary and reading comprehension, extraordinary.
Our purpose here is to discover why.
But school achievements, extremely low. Dropped out at 18 in the 11th grade. When murder occurs for no apparent reason, but happens all the time, as in our race on Saturday nights, it is ritual murder. That is, no apparent reason, but there are reasons. The reasons are both personal and common. When a people who have no method of letting off steam against the source of their oppression explode against each other, homicide under these conditions is a form of group suicide. When personal chemistries don't mix, just a little spark can bring about the explosion. Ice picks, guns, knives, and whatever happened to be lying around.
When murder occurs for no apparent reason, as in our race on Saturday night, it is ritual
murder.
The chief of police.
The rate of crime in the streets of New Orleans and America has risen sharply. Last year, 73 officers died in felonious killings in the line of duty, the highest total since 1995. We know that most of our African American citizens are wholesome, law-abiding, decent citizens. But the fact remains that the crime wave we are witnessing now across the nation is disproportionately black crime. Stop this minority of our lost brothers and sisters, and you will stop crime. The police need more protection, more rights, and more weapons of all types to deal with the crime wave. We need more assault rifles, submachine guns, flashbang grenades, super rifles, and SWAT teams. Otherwise, America is going to become a nightmare of crime in the streets, impacting you as well as our first responders.
Joe Brown's employer, Mr. Andrews.
Now, I have trouble with several of my young black boys here, but I like some. Now, Joe, he's a little different from the rest. He's what do you say, a little more dreamlike, a little more absent-minded. He's always quitting, but I guess he liked it here because he always come back. You can't tell me anything about these people. Now, recently, Joe was going down to the bathroom a lot and staying there for a long time. I asked the other boys, I said, "Where's that doggone Joe?" And they told me. So one day I go down to John and there he is sitting on a stool reading. I say, "Boy, I'm paying you to read or to shell oysters?" He comes out all sulky. He can be a little sensitive, you know. As to why he killed that boy, I got no answers. I think maybe it's because those folks, the way they like to get wild on weekends, you know? I mean, you don't know what a boy like Joe can get mixed up in. Or any of them there. I don't know. I don't understand. I know them. I likes them all. My job is to keep them straight here. Any of them, any trouble out of any of them, out the door they go.
Ms. Richland Spaulding, Director of the Housing Authority of New Orleans.
After Hurricane Katrina, many of our housing authorities residents was forced to vacate their apartments due to water damage, although many buildings sustained only minor damages. At the time of the storm, the Housing Authority of New Orleans was servicing 14,129 families. Out of those, 64% or 8,981 received vouchers, while 36% or 5,148 were in public housing. After families moved out, many projects were demolished and converted into mixed income townhomes. Between 2005 and 2013, the Housing Authority of New Orleans demolished all of its properties, with only a couple of buildings preserved for historical landmarks. The public housing in New Orleans has been subjected to federal control for a number of years. Before Hurricane Katrina, these housing projects in New Orleans have also been home to important cultural contributions, such as the birth of bounce music, Lil Wayne, and Master P.
Bounce music? Miss Spaulding, any insights into the murder of James Roberts by his friend Joe Brown Jr.?
In 1936, the Louisiana legislature passed the Housing Authority Act, allowing for the creation of the Housing Authority of New Orleans and paving the way for the city to participate in national low-income programs.
Thank you, Miss Spaulding.
My pleasure.
This is Joe Brown's father.
Joe was always this sweet, kind boy. But his problem was he stopped going to church. I mean, I would try to tell him about it, but it wouldn't make no difference. See, when you climb out of Christ's chariot, you are always liable to run into trouble. I mean, I tell the truth about my own children just like I would anybody else. I mean, one day before Joe got married, he done came home with a temper talking about how his boss was talking to him and he was telling me how he should get paid more. And, you know, I'm thinking to myself, I mean, you got a lot of people who don't even have a job. Saying like he didn't like how his boss talked to him. I mean, so many black people, let alone, don't even have jobs. I told him, if you want to do better, why don't you just go back to school? He just sunk. He didn't even do that. And then I told him to go to church. I mean, I've been trying to tell him. I mean, when he's hanging around with bad friends and smoking dope. I mean, people like that you would think is harmless. And about his supervisor, I mean, you can't talk to your supervisor like that. I mean, black, white, or brown, I mean, talking about your supervisor like that is like banging your head up against a brick wall.
Mr. Brown, do you feel your son was killed for no reason? There must have been a reason.
I mean, when you hang around at a bad crowd on a Saturday night, trouble's gonna come your way. I know. I haven't been a minister all my life. Somebody told me that some boy was picking on him, and you know, Joe is very sensitive. He's like serious and sensitive.
Mr. Brown, the purpose of this program is to discover why your son shot his friend. No one seems to have answers. We're using the scientific approach. Do you have any answers?
Look, man, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why. I don't understand. I mean, it's like you try to protect your children the best way you can. It's like one of those things, like a disease. Like you hope that nobody gets you or nobody else. I mean, the Lord is our only protection.
And your wife, would she happen to have any information, any ideas?
I ain't seen that woman in 4 years.
Oh, I plan to go see the boy. I just ain't had the chance yet. I can't understand why he would do a thing like that.
If we could hear what James Roberts has to say.
It was all a joke. Nothing happened that hasn't happened before between us. Joe is still my best friend. If I were alive, I'd tell anyone that. That Saturday was a terrible one. Not just because the lights went out for me. I heard a ringing in my ear when I woke up that morning. When I went to work at the hotel, the first thing I had to do was take out the garbage. Have you ever smelled the stink of shrimp and oyster shells first thing in the morning? I hate that. The sounds of the street and the moan of the cook's voice, ugh, that's enough to drive anyone crazy, you hear me? And I hear it every day. That day I decided I'm gonna leave this job for real. 1 more week at the most.
Same thing happened to me. I decided I was gonna leave my job.
Man, you are disgusting. You all the time talking about leaving your job.
Guys, get to what happened at the club, please. We don't have all night.
We were both very uptight. Mad at our jobs, everybody, everything around us.
I know I was ready to shoot somebody.
Shut up, fool. This is my scene.
You won't even let nobody agree with you.
Please.
Joe went on and on all the evening, all night. We both getting higher and higher, going from club to club. We went to Scotty's.
We went to Savannah's.
Havana's.
Yeah.
We had my sister's car. Joe getting mad and frustrated, talking about what he was gonna do. By the time we got to the Ninth Ward Cafe, we was both stoned out of our minds. Joe again getting
Dreamier.
He was talking about all his problems. his wife,
My job.
his children. I could understand that.
No, you couldn't, because you do not have those problems, Jones.
Joe was screaming about the white man, how he was $1,500 in debt,
Working like hell.
turning right around and giving it back to him. He said he couldn't laugh no more.
I couldn't. You know, I had a dream. I had $66 million left to me by an unknown relative.
We was in the
Knifewood
Knifewood Cafe, sitting in the booth by ourselves. The DJ was playing something. I think it was Aha, Lil Durk. Yeah, it was. City was lit. Joe was talking about there was nowhere he could go to relax anymore. Then suddenly, his mind would go off into this outer space place. And I had to jerk him back. I would ask him what he was thinking about. And he would say he wasn't happy with himself. He didn't know himself or where he was headed to anymore.
I always get screwed up when I try to figure out the first thing I'm gonna buy. New car maybe, Lexus, new house, a brick one with wood paneling, a new outfit, some Air Force Ones, an iPad, even a PlayStation 5. Then you know I gotta break everybody off a little something. But I can't figure out what I'm gonna buy first.
And I would say, man, what is you talking about? I don't understand all these blues of what happens every day. He said he wanted to believe there is hope.
There is hope.
I told him, there ain't no hope. You a black mother.
Hey, young man.
And you might as well learn to make the best of it.
People always tell me I can't make my mind up on what I want. Or I want things that
Don't make sense.
Or I want too much instead of being
Satisfied with
just
the
a
little.
little. People always tell me I
Ask too many questions.
especially questions that
No one can answer.
and I'm just frustrated myself because I can never find the answers. The way I figure it, you might as well just dream 66 million and 66,000. The way I figure it. You might as well ask questions you don't know the answers to. I mean, what's the point of asking questions everyone knows the answers to? Know it all. Life is just a little thing anyway. It doesn't really amount to much when you think about time and place.
Then he just blew. Screaming.
Nobody called me a black mother.
Hey! Gentlemen, please.
I just laugh. Everybody calls him that. Because that's what he is. There's nothing wrong with calling anyone that. We've been doing it to each other all our lives. We did it all evening while we were drinking. I just laughed. He jumps up, pulls the gun out, aims at my heart. Now, I could fight Joe off any day. But Nikes. He got to jump on me. And I couldn't get to my Glock. It was ridiculous. He was like a crazy man. Wild man. Turning on me for no reason. When I ain't done nothing to him. Shouting.
There is no hope.
Before I knew it, I was stunned and weak. And there was blood all over my chest and my shirt. I felt the light darken and my whole body turned to rubber.
Nikes on Saturday night.
But I couldn't move. Couldn't move anything. Last thing I heard was Joe. His eyes blazing. Everything turned to red.
You mean this caused such a brutal act? You called him a name?
That's all it takes sometimes.
And you think this makes sense? To lose your life at 19 over such an insignificant thing?
It happens all the time. I accept it. Joe is still My best friend. Friends kill each other all the time. Unless you have an enemy,
You can kill together.
you both can kill.
And you, Joe?
What is there to say? It happened. It happens all the time. One thing I learned, when you pull a knife or a gun, don't fool around. Use it. Or you might not get the chance to.
Better him than me.
He would say the same thing if it was the other way around.
Do you feel like you died for anything?
Yeah, I died for something. But I don't know what that means.
What do you mean when you said there is no hope?
I don't know. There is no hope. Here, in this jail cell, with my face, I might be better off dead. I'd be better off dead.
We have seen something unpleasant, but the play is over. Yes, we see this thing night after night, weekend after weekend, but only we have the power to stop it. It has to do with something in our minds. Play Summertime for Joe Brown Jr. and play the same Summertime for his friend, James Roberts, who he shot to death.